Hello and welcome. Our top focus today remains on South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa is bolstering support for the African National Congress-led coalition government. Ramaphosa claims support of 5 parties, after which the government of national unity represents more than 2/3 seats in the National Assembly. Now, Ramaphosa is set to be sworn in at an inauguration ceremony on Wednesday. He will preside over the 7th administration of South Africa since the end of apartheid. Cyril Ramaphosa also found voices of support from across the globe as world leaders congratulated him for his second term as president. And the biggest voice of support was from Russia. On Monday, Russian President Vladimir Putin dialed Ramaphosa to congratulate him on his re-election. Putin and Ramaphosa discussed further strengthening of partnership between Russia and South Africa in quote-unquote all aspects. The telephone call between the two leaders reflects on continued good relations between Moscow and Pretoria, despite uncertainty over Russia's more than 2-year-old invasion of Ukraine. Since then, both Russia and Ukraine have jostled for support from African nations. Foreign ministers of both countries have embarked on several tours of the continent. Why? Because 54 African Union member states are together a strong voice at the United Nations. Both Russia and Ukraine seek to lobby African allies for favorable votes at the UN. South Africa, like a number of African states, has shared long-standing links with Moscow that date back to the Soviet times. Back then, Moscow was a prominent supporter of liberation movements and the fight to end apartheid, which was spearheaded by the African National Congress. Pretoria initially denounced Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022, but has since adopted a more nuanced approach, and South Africa abstained in several votes at the UN General Assembly condemning Russian actions. South Africa also attended the Ukraine Peace Summit hosted by Switzerland this weekend, but it declined to sign the final communiqué. In 2023, South Africa found itself in a dilemma as it hosted a meeting of the BRICS grouping. Pretoria considered inviting Putin for the meeting despite an ICC arrest warrant against him on allegations of deportation of Ukrainian children. However, in the end, Putin chose not to visit South Africa and attended the summit virtually. Now, after re-election, all eyes are back on President Cyril Ramaphosa's foreign policy and how he navigates tricky global diplomatic endeavours. Despite the Ukraine war, South Africa's relations with Russia have only been deepening. Last year, South Africa participated in war games with Russia and China. U.S. Ambassador to South Africa also accused the country of loading weapons onto a sanctioned Russian cargo ship. In July of 2023, Ramaphosa also attended a Russia-Africa summit in St. Petersburg. Now, when the war in Gaza began, South Africa's foreign minister dialed Hamas political bureau chief Ismail Haniyeh, and this was followed by a visit to Iran. By December of 2023, South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice, accusing it of a genocide in Gaza. Then, in January this year, Ramaphosa drew criticism when he hosted the leader of Sudanese paramilitary RSF, General Mohammed Dagalo, popularly known as Hamedi. Now, the RSF has been accused of human rights abuses in Sudan, where a civil war has been raging. So, South Africa's foreign policy has been puzzling to say the least. While some analysts pinpoint at glaring inconsistencies in South Africa's diplomacy, the others call it consistent with a focus on Africa's needs and interests. As major conflicts around the world remain far from being resolved, for Cyril Ramaphosa, the complex balancing act is only going to get tougher, both at home and abroad. Now, for more on this, we have with us Patrick Bond. He is a distinguished professor and director of the Centre for Social Change at the University of Johannesburg. Welcome to Firstpost.
Oh, thanks, Alison. Great to be with you and your viewers.
Putin has called President Ramaphosa to congratulate him on his second term, and they spoke of strengthening the partnership between South Africa and Russia. Professor, what are your thoughts on this show of support by Putin, and what does this mean for the ties between the two countries?
It's so interesting that, as you pointed out, President Ramaphosa's election and his inauguration tomorrow cannot be attended by Vladimir Putin. Not only that he's in North Korea, but that there's an arrest warrant that South Africa must respect. If not, there's a constitutional crisis because the judiciary would enforce that International Criminal Court order from last year, in which Putin and one of his colleagues are accused of the kidnap of 20,000 children from Ukraine. And that's been a source of enormous friction, partly because the United States is using that. And if Donald Trump is elected in November, would use it even more to threaten South Africa with removal from the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which is mainly for the export of steel and aluminium and automobiles and petrochemicals. So it would affect multinational corporates. And that's one of the great sticking points associated with this conflict between whether Ramaphosa looks east and to the BRICS or west and to the US and Europe. And the crucial moment probably comes when the Democratic Alliance, its new center-right party as a coalition partner after the disappointing ANC 40% showing, they don't like Russia, and they will probably demand a bit of a change of policy, a look more to the West. And Ramaphosa, a businessman, would probably be comfortable as he jettisons part of his own internal left wing.
And analysts have reflected on these inconsistencies in South Africa's diplomacy and foreign policy, while others say that it merely focuses on Africa's needs and interests. How would you describe the balancing act that Ramaphosa is facing, considering the global political landscape, especially with regard to the West and Russia?
Well, as I say, the cynics might see this as talk left, walk right, because most of the business dealings and when, there's a de-dollarization move here, when we hosted the BRICS in Johannesburg last August, the South African business and banking community and the finance minister and Reserve Bank governor just said, no, we don't want to move in that direction. So there tends to be radical rhetoric, and that's most clear with solidarity with Palestine. But the contradiction, again, because you are dealing with the dialectic, is that there are huge coal exports by both South Africa and Russia to Israel going on right now, even while Colombia, the number one coal exporter to Israel, has said, no, we'll do sanctions because of that genocide. Now, it's a very, let's say, complicated tap dance because Ramaphosa is also connected to the coal exports through his brother-in-law and through the company Glencore, which he used to be the main partner of. And these are the, let's say, balancing acts that we don't really see very much of. We see the, let's say, dust in the air of the geopolitics, but it's really these material factors I would look at.
Right. And in terms of future collaborations between the two nations, what is the benefit for Russia and the benefit for South Africa?
Well, obviously, Russia would want not only Cyril Ramaphosa, but more African countries to be more explicit in their support in the UN. And as you pointed out, in the Swiss meeting for peace in Ukraine, the South African, Sidney Mufamadi, was simply vacant. He just didn't want to sign and was a bit critical. And I think that also reflected the foreign ministers' meetings of the BRICS in Russia on June 10, because the foreign minister who's outgoing, Naledi Pandor, a very brave, heroic solidarity activist with Palestine, she was silent on Ukraine. And a year ago, the attempt by South Africa, Ramaphosa, to be a peacemaker, Ukraine, Kiev one day and Moscow the next, has really fallen apart. There's nothing much to that. So for the future, I would look at more, again, material interest, because Russian petroleum and gas interests are in South Africa's main gas processing site on the Indian Ocean. But also there were always promises of nuclear energy collaboration, and those may well be revived. On the other hand, the Democratic Alliance probably would have some veto power now that they're the coalition partner with about 22% of the vote, the ANC with 40%, and that's going to be the balancing act internally that we're all concerned about. It doesn't look like a very stable government of national unity, and maybe US, Russia, South Africa, Russia, and South African US ties will all be bound up in a big fight over who's loyal to whom at what point and for what interests.
Thank you very much, Professor, for being with us on Firstpost Africa and your valued insights.
Thank you.
Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change, to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost.